Welcome to the Future Living Lab podcast, a place where you can find conversations with your professors, instructors, and industry professionals about things you might want to know. We are your hosts, Simbreen
and Matt. In today's episode, we discuss the versatility of your design degree. This topic is especially relevant to undergraduate students in architecture, as many don't go on to become licensed architects, rather follow diverse careers in art and design. To help us unpack this topic, we've scoured the U of T design community and found the perfect guest, Jeffrey Garcia.
And now we have Jeffrey Garcia.
So Jeffrey, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. I'm so excited. It's our first podcast for the Future Living Lab podcast here with Amberine.
Hello.
Hey guys. So today on the agenda, we're talking about the versatility of your design degree. And Jeffrey, from the conversations that I've had with you, it seems that you've really explored the design field and you've gotten an interdisciplinary approach to multiple design mediums, and you've worked in multiple design firms and schools. So Jeffrey, you have a very diverse portfolio across the disciplines of design. Right off the bat, you have an interdisciplinary master's in art, media, and design.
Yes.
Your work also includes curation, exhibits, installations, graphic design, design competitions, and architecture visualization. You're also a lecturer from the University of Manitoba, and now you are a lecturer at the University of Toronto. So did I miss anything?
No, I think that's it.
It's a long list.
A long list of things you have been doing in one life.
So with all these works, it's clear that you're the perfect person to talk about the versatility of your design degree.
Thank you.
So Jeffrey, how has this interdisciplinary approach to design benefited you? And would you encourage the same level of exploration for future students, namely future architects?
I think with an interdisciplinary background, it's more responsive to where we are culturally, where we can't just be in our own silos. That whatever field you're in, you're always going to have to be adjacent to something else. Like if you look at even something as simple as really well-respected publications like the New Yorker and the New York Times, they're always divided into sections. Like the New York Times is known for their politics, but they have incredible architecture critics and fashion critics and food critics. And the New Yorker, you'll have people talk about really rare squids in the ocean, to architecture movements, to how A24 is leading the industry in authorship in film, right? So this managing of complexities and different influences, I think, is the most contemporary way that we can practice. Because I think there are times when designers want to design, and there are times when we just kind of want to take a break from it for a while and just kind of delve into something else. But with interdisciplinarity, it allows us to go back into wherever we want to go into. And I think with a lot of us, we're so much more than the discipline that we started in. Because I started off with an interior design degree. I've done everything except work for an interior design firm. So it's kind of ironic that that's actually my degree. But I've worked for landscape architecture firms doing exhibit design for them. I've done work for architecture offices. We have our own practice. So my own field of study, which I did really poorly in, thankfully, I actually did not end up doing interior design because it wasn't something that resonated with me. And because that didn't, for me, make sense as a discipline, I just had to find something else that I found interesting and I was passionate about.
That is absolutely so surprising. I had no clue and no idea that you have been doing all of these things. And you actually, how did you transfer from to architecture if you studied interior designing in the beginning? How did that process look like?
I struggled at school. I usually tell students halfway through that in my first year of university, I failed. So I failed when I applied to grad school, my average is a D average. So I was surprised that any university took me because on paper, I am the worst student you could possibly get. because when I was at the time, the interior design degree I was in was a professional degree. So we had to look at the practicalities of interior design. But then after the first year, I realized that's not what I was interested in. I was more interested in ideas. And then that's when I started like talking to my friends in architecture and just started to read up more on architecture. And that's how I fell into it, is that even though I don't have a degree in architecture, it doesn't mean that I can't be part of the discourse in architecture. And that's what I am so grateful for about Daniels, is that it is known as like, it is this preeminent school of design.
Absolutely.
And yet they let this person come in with who failed at school, come in and do reviews at like in landscape architecture and architecture, undergraduate thesis, master's thesis, because all the school really is interested in, do you have something to contribute? Are there ideas that you can share? And is there a room for you? And is there room for students to have discourse? And that to me is like where I think Daniels is so revolutionary and so advanced as an architecture school, is it sees beyond these disciplines and looks at design being as inclusive, that architecture is an umbrella for all of these different disciplines, but architecture is just the really quick go-to of like, oh, it's architectural, right? That's the way we describe a lot of design endeavors. And so that's why I got into architecture, is because I didn't have much interest in things that were practical.
Let me tell you, that's super reassuring. Like for a lot of students, right, where we are focusing and taking architecture as just like a structured design course, or we are going to be making buildings. But at Daniels, where we have this versatility and we can do a lot of things, I do believe, like, because of these diverse nature of things you have been doing, it has somehow developed your own kind of design style, right? And you are able to contribute in specific architecture practice. You have been able to take a bit of interior, take a bit of other stuff you have been doing, right? So how does that work? Like, can you give us an example of something like that you have encountered or you have been doing, right?
I think that always the challenging thing is like I've been teaching for 15 years, 5 years at Daniels and 10 years at the University of Manitoba Faculty of Architecture. And every day I teach, my palms still get really sweaty because I have no idea what's going to happen, right? And so it's this sort of hesitation and just like almost like getting pushed on the stage. It's like, okay, now it's your turn. And then just trusting that you have no idea what the conversation is going to be. But what I hope with having an interdisciplinary background is that whatever conversation I could have with a student, that there's something I could contribute. If it's not architecture, then I'm like, okay, here's an anecdote about graphic design, or, oh, you should see this one designer who does these really great shoes, right? So that there's at least a way to talk about design in a way that maybe other students can understand in a different field as opposed to architecture. So it's like, okay, we may not understand the structure of a building, but let's talk about how like Nola Blahnik designs high heels for shoes, right? So it's like, okay, I understand that. That's something, I understand structure. I understand the need of being able to stand up when I'm in shoes. So it's another way of talking about design and structure laterally using similar principles, but just in a different context, so that you're able to find a way to share knowledge without one knowledge set superseding another, that architecture is not anymore or more better than interior design or industrial design, that it is all just a discipline.
100%.
Yeah, I really resonate with that as well, thinking about the ideas and prioritizing the concept, and that being applicable to multiple mediums as well, and that it's true that architecture is a pathway to so many design practices. One of the things I want to talk about that's really unique about you told me this last year, you actually prefer to draft your drawings by hand instead of drawing digitally on the computer, which is very unique, especially these days where we're learning so many softwares in school. So walk me through why hand drafting is your medium of choice, and would you recommend it to someone else?
I think the easiest response is I'm old and I don't like change. So I went through school like hand drafting. When it got to digital work, I got a bit old, and like a couple summers ago, my partner, Brandon Burgum, said, Jeff, you should really learn how to use computer modeling. And he's just like, okay, you know what, this week, just do the SketchUp tutorial and just like, we'll see how it goes. It took me a week to do a box that had a gable roof. So if that was SketchUp and it took me a week to do that, but I know in design discovery, kids could do that like within half an hour. I know definitely that is not the way that I need to work. But partially it was when I was going through school, like I struggled a lot, but for me, what got me through it to find my own voice was actually looking at how much Zaha Hadid struggled and, you know, just like obsessive about her background. And she used to say that the hand is the most intuitive tool that you have. And before going to architecture school, I always used to draw and I'm like, okay, so that makes sense that connection between the hand and the mind is the most immediate thing. As soon as you go into technology, there becomes an intermediary. And so with design, it's like it is the quickest, sketching for me is the quickest way to get an idea out there. And since I'm not necessarily great with structure or things that are logistical, for me, it's like, this is the big idea, and then let's just massage it until it actually fits something. If it needs to be architectural and it has to fit within codes or it has certain requirements of like wall thickness, then we could figure that out. Yeah. But for me, it's like, here's the overall gesture, here's the idea. And then I'm just so grateful that my partner can interpret all my squiggles and lines and actually draft it up into things that look like architecture. But to me, when students work digitally, you can zoom in and zoom out infinitesimally, right? So there's no fixed scale. But as soon as you draw, there is a default scale that you work at. And then if you decide to enlarge, it's always another drawing, right? So there is always an addition to, there is never like this overlap, and you can't erase as easily. Like there's no Control Z with a marker. You just have to kind of work your way through. So I find drawing is a thought process, and it's a way of exploring page and like as a field condition, and just trying to not necessarily worry about what the building is going to look like, but what are the other constituent aspects of architecture? What does it feel like? What is it like to circulate through? What are the sight lines? So those are things about architecture that I find interesting, is the inhabitation, but also like really odd congruencies of programs, not necessarily the form. I'm really horrible at form making.
Right. I think it is very true and super interesting, because I think you mentioned about even Zahari's style of like how she came up with concepts or whatever. And I think at some point when I was deciding to study architecture, obviously number one inspiration to go into the field, and correct me if I'm wrong, she used to write Arabic. So she used to start with Arabic calligraphy and from there kind of like defining forms, right? So a super interesting way. And I think I worked in the same way in the beginning, that taking out concepts from like sketching certain things, patterns, and taking out concepts from there. However, as when I came to school, whatever I drew on paper was never what I drew on like the software. Mm-hmm. It always changed. It started as curves and it ended up being a square. Because again, software, we all struggle from it. Obviously over time, now that I'm like in my fourth year, things have been changed. But I think from hearing from you, and even as like, an upper year, I would always suggest that keep that practice, just because it's not just about how much you're able to draft, but also how much you're able to design, right? And I think you're absolutely correct in that part, like what you suggested. Yeah. Oh, this is a very interesting fact. Oh, you received a Carl Nelson Teaching Award.
Yes, I did.
Okay. Amazing. Like, honestly, yeah. So there's a question we were curious about, that, in your opinion, what makes teaching architecture exciting and meaningful? And what do you hope students take away from your classes? So, and also like, maybe if you could touch a little bit on, how do you interpret these awards? Right? Are these like a personal validation or like a recognition of a teaching philosophy you believe in?
Well, it's like I'm looking at this camera. It's like, I'm not sure if you guys can see me cry, but I'm probably going to tear up at this when it comes to this. Because when I taught the U of M, my interior design degree was a professional degree. So it was a first professional, which meant I was allowed to teach with other instructors who had master's degrees. So that's why there was parity that most of the interior design instructors had a professional degree, which means they didn't need a master's. So up until getting that teaching award, I felt for years that I needed to apologize to my students after every year that they did not get the instructor they deserved, because I was not the most educated. I was the one who failed school. I struggled. And so up in that point, I just thought I was doing a disservice for them, and it wasn't their fault. They just got placed into these groups. And when I got the teaching award, you could tell there was a setup, because when the dean it was an awards night, my colleague lied about me going to the awards ceremony, because she said that her husband was in Hong Kong. She needed a date if I wanted to go. So I'm like, sure. And she's like, we haven't talked in a while. I'm like, okay. So I sat there, but then I saw her husband, and I'm like, okay, so something's up. And then the dean was, after all the awards went to the students, he said, right now, the award that we're going to give out is one of the most important ones, because it is the one that is given by students. So this award is fully from what students think is valuable for education. And then Brandon always laughs at this, because as soon as he read my name and asked to get the award, I literally jumped in his arms like I was a contestant in The Price is Right. So for me, it's like, what that award meant was that I no longer had to apologize or feel guilty that I was less than my colleagues. 100%. And that also meant that students saw value in what it is that they learn, because at the end of the day, it's not about me, it's about them. And the thing that I find the most exciting about education is like when I disappear and where they become foregrounded. So it's like whatever I have to say about them, it's like it just kind of becomes part of their arsenal. And then they find the thing that they find passionate about design. So it could be industrial design, it could be architecture, it could be baking. But it's like, that's all I hope students get, is that I think really strong students, really strong designers, I think really strong educators, the two traits that they have is that they're really passionate about what they do, and that they're really resilient, that no matter what happens, you'll just kind of pick up and you'll just kind of move forward.
I agree. I haven't been formally one of your students, but from what I've heard and from the times you've been in class with us, you really foster a positive space, and you make us want to be designers as well, like yourself. So, and we feel like we can achieve that in an open space. And I think I speak for a lot of people who really enjoy being in your courses. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Very kind.
Actually, thank you so much. And the key word here would be passionate, I would say. I think you said like students are just passionate about learning, but we're also very passionate about like seeing educators or teachers who are as passionate about you, about our careers and our design thinking, and how you can push us to do that. And I think you do it in a very positive manner, and thank you so much for that. I think if today we had a Wooding and Daniels, who's the best professor, I think you'll be top up there. So yeah, I think it was well deserved, So thank you so much.
Well, we've covered quite a bit so far. We've covered your education and your work as a teacher, but obviously you've also had a big career outside of school, and you've worked at numerous firms, and that's brought you to Office in Search Of, which is your current practice with Brandon Bergam. So for those of you who don't know OISO yet, could you just give us a brief rundown?
We're just like, I'm trying to remember, we had to give a bio to a publication that just got made. I'm like, we had to write it over and over again. So I'm trying to remember what it is that we put on the back of the book. I think it's like, Office in Search Of is an interdisciplinary collaborative practice that specializes in architectural representation. But we also specialize in research, competitions, installations, and exhibition. So the stuff that our office is known for, that is what Brandon and the boys do. I do not generate income in the office. So like all that great stuff, when people like congratulate us, like, you know what, I'm going to pass that along to them, because that's really what Brandon's forte is in terms of the business. I am just like the back end, where it was always really important for us that we were seen as a practice that's more than just image making, because I think it's very easy to just dismiss practices like, oh, all they do is pictures. But everyone who worked for us has either a Master's of Architecture or undergraduate degree from Daniels. And for us, like, research is what I'm the most interested in, and small scale design. So we just really want to push the fact that we do more than just images, that we are like a serious office.
Yeah, it comes back to your design philosophy of really narrowing down the ideas and good research, which I know you're part of in the image making process, and you're also part of writing, for example, in your recent publication in the Scaffold book that I was able to see. I brought some pictures here, some of the renders. So that's another great part of OISO.
I'm actually very curious. Like we know about like Office and Search of. I honestly wanted to know, like, how did it start? Like when? Like what happened?
It was a
And why?
And why?
why RSO?
Is having your own practice so important?
Well, there's a few years ago when I was about to finish school, for Christmas as a gift, Brandon bought us a domain name, OISO. We had no idea what it meant. Brandon just really liked the idea of OISO. And part of the reason it was strategic, because if I was graduating from school, I didn't have an email address that I could use for applying to universities for teaching, because my OCAD university account changed to a student as opposed to faculty. Sending a resume using Gmail or Macmail, not necessarily the best, or Hotmail. So it just so happened, by having that domain name, I actually had a legitimate email that I could use to send to universities, right? So it's like, props to him for already like trying to future forecast, opportunities. But Brandon at the time was working for a really fantastic office in Winnipeg, and they just won a huge recognition at Canadian Architect 5468796 architecture in Winnipeg. And one of the things that Brandon was doing was a lot of their representation visualization. And it was something that even when Brandon was an undergrad, he was always interested in how we communicate ideas and narratives through images. And it was something that he taught himself, something that he was interested in, and he realized like it was a really strong presence in the office. Then somebody saw the work and asked Brandon if he would do work for them, and things just kind of snowballed, that one client led to another client, that led to another client. And then COVID hit, and it became this point of evaluation, like, okay, what do we do with our lives now? And then for Brandon, it's like, well, do you know what? World is slowing down. The firm that he worked at in Winnipeg, they used to fly him every few months, because we were already based in Toronto. And I think for him, it was this moment of just self-reflection, like, okay, where do I want to go with this? And we were lucky that we had a domain name so that we could launch that. And when we determined Office and Search of, it was because of the nature of us always being speculative and not necessarily getting down into a design discipline, because we are an office, but we are always in search of something. Like, even if you look at our business card, it's just like a whole bunch of dots that just kind of leads to what the next thing is. So it's like an office in search of a competition, office in search of an article, office in search of research. So it's always like this addendum to what Office in Search of is.
Wow, that's such a wonderful concept, actually. My friends at Daniels who wants to give me a domain, please do that ASAP, please. Because we just found out the best idea to get a job, to apply for grad school. No, that is actually wonderful and really inspiring. Like, this is how much you could actually do with with a design company, I would say, or a design practice. It's not just we do one thing. We are searching to do things, right? And all those interesting things. I think we did wanted to talk a little bit about the research. H. Wilston,
Yeah.
your Yeah.
master's thesis.
Yes,
Yeah.
please, for a lot of us who don't know about it, like,
Because I don't even know if that's the proper pronunciation, because it was a flash drive that I got from the digital fabrication lab from OCAD, and the only information was H. Wilston. So I don't even know if that's the proper pronunciation.
okay.
It's going with H. Wilston.
So yeah, whatever we say, H. Wilson, yeah. So yeah, like it was something translating data and memory into objects and architecture form. So for for some of us who don't know about that research, could you just explain the project and why you chose the approach of preservation in that way?
I was interested. It's a contemporary field called experimental preservation, and it was a field of study that was done by Jorge Otero Pelos from Columbia University, who's in preservation and planning. And for him, it's just like the way that we think of preservation needs to change. He thinks of it as the future anterior, where it's kind of have to jump in your mind that what we consider to be the past, what we consider to be now, is going to be considered the past and the future. So experimental preservation tries to position yourself in your milieu and just like, what is it about our time that we need other people to know about our world? And then try and find preservation practices to do that. I chose the topic because I didn't know much about technology.
Right.
So when I went to grad school at OCAD, I was just very fortunate that the way the program worked is that you could take, I was in the IAMD program, but I could also take courses in curatorial practices and digital features. And I took grad school as an opportunity to learn things that I didn't know. So I don't play video games, but my partner does. But I took a video game design course because the instructor was one of the first female game designers in the UK, and her PhD was on a feminist, queer-centric approach to video game design. So I'm like, who's not going to take a video game design course from her, right? Like,
100%. Like anyone would.
like who talks about like video games as a discursive theory? And she's like, she did. And when she asked me why I was taking the class, I'm like, it's because I don't know what I can't do. So that's really the reason why. It's like, I'm in a new place, don't know anything, so I'm just gonna try. And with this, I had no idea how software worked, and so I thought this is the perfect thesis, because the premise of the program I was at OCAD is that you walk in with one discipline, and then you walk out with a different discipline. And since my discipline was really just competitions, I'm like, okay, now I've got to be a maker, and I just need to find an introduction. And I thought, what is the smallest thing that I could design? I'm like, oh, data. And then looking at research, that there was one of the people who started Google was saying that there's something known as the digital black hole, that the data that we started using from the 70s is now deteriorating. So there is data that we are going to lose that cannot get, that we'll never regain. And then also there are things like redundancy of technology. Like, you guys are too young for this, but there were like floppy disks, hard disks. And so even if you find those devices, they usually can't sync up with the computers that we have. But even if they do, we don't have the software to get the information. So there's data that's always going to be locked away that we can't access. So the premise of the project was, how do we translate data in a way that will move beyond redundancy? And it was trying to translate data into reliquaries, which is like, when you look at reliquaries, they're usually associated with Christianity, where they're forms that sacred objects would go into them, and they were usually very ornate and really expensive, and certain churches would be known for their reliquaries, like the finger of a saint. And so I just thought that these would be contemporary reliquaries where you would use data to translate, you would use software, translate data into form. So in the future, you could reverse engineer and say, this is what this form looks like. So then I'm going to reverse engineer this. So this is what the data is. And then, so there's that aspect of it. And then I'm just like, okay, but I'm also really interested in architecture. It just can't be objects. And I thought, well, the way that we preserve information, if this is going to be a new way of archiving data, then there has to be a new way of presenting it. So I developed this reliquarium where it's like, it's a new process of, it's a facility of creating these objects and putting them on display. So it's an analog way, it's almost like an analog data center of showing the outcome of preserving data.
That's so incredible. It really speaks to how you're able to apply your previous skills as well as learn this whole new set of skills for your master's.
Well, when I was in grad studies, it was really daunting because the first day of class, I told my partner that I made a mistake because I walked in because our interdisciplinary program was mostly artists. I was one of the only designers. And when they had this roundtable, what everyone did, people were like, well, I just came back from Poland and did this collective work. I have my work in the AGL. And I'm just like, me, it's like, I've got pictures. That's about it. And whenever I got insecure about what I was doing, I always just remembered, okay, I always told my students that you just need to try, you need to fail, you need to fail forward. And I'm just like, out of respect for all the years I got students upset and frustrated, I needed to take the same advice and just be comfortable not being certain.
100%. Okay, this was a heavy topic for me to understand. And like one session, I was like, okay, what was the research about? It was about a lot of things. It wasn't just one thing. And I do believe from like you found your research topic and it did like take over time and it changed over time as you were saying, right? And I think we would like this would also bridge us to our next session, which we are talking about like helping students kind of session. And I think it's a genuine question from my side is there's an aspect as an architecture student that when you walk in, you come up with a lived life, a bunch of information you have, your culture, your heritage, readings you have read, whatever. And you have that part that you might be interested in your research. But then there's this challenging part, which you took an approach of, like, this is a new thing. Let's just explore that. So that's one way of maybe collaborating and bringing a research idea. But what would you suggest to, for example, Ambreen or Matt or any other student to find a research topic? Like, if someone is interested in research, like how do we, because that's one thing we struggle with as students. Like, what is a research topic?
Okay, in the most banal way, it's thinking about like, how do I make myself a really good dinner guest so that I get invited to really good dinners so I can like have something really interesting to talk about at table. And I think it's that mentality. I'm like, okay, if I'm at a dinner table around really fascinating people, what would I like to be an authority of knowing? And what would I like to share? And I think that's the topic that you go with, is that what is the thing that you have so much certainty that you're confident that it is something that you don't even have to think about. It is just so embedded in you that it becomes a conversation as opposed to this like lecture.
Wow. Again, like it all comes down to how passionate you are about something. So you can passionately kind of explain it like you actually did right now to us. Very nice. So yeah.
So Jeffrey, we've talked about a lot of pieces of work that you've done for school and for work. But we've also established that you have this really strong passion for design. Do you feel satisfied by working and completing your design just for other people or for school? Or do you have a design or art outlet on the side? And how do you stay passionate about design?
I think I have a really awful work-life balance that everything I drop for school. When Brandon and I were still in Winnipeg, we had this deal because he worked really hard at his office that we don't work on weekends because that's quality time. It was perfect when he went to grad school because he wasn't around, so I could work on weekends, so I could work on schoolwork and course prep for as long as I want. And for me, it's trying to get students prepared for being excited about whatever they want to do. Like that's what my job is to help facilitate their discovery of what it is that is interesting to them and hopefully try and get them to discover options for themselves of how that can find itself and manifest itself.
Do students' design sometimes influence you or your thoughts?
Yeah, all the time. I'd say the way that students think about design are things that influence me, where it's like, there are times when things are just so wonderfully ridiculous. Like a student used to say that you could tell a good crit is by how much I laugh. And I actually had a student get upset because he's like, Jeff, you didn't laugh that much during my review. So it's like everything okay? And it's just like, I always tell students school is such a privilege that you might as well just go balls to the wall absurd, right? Because that's really where you find yourself is when it's like, okay, do you know what? I don't know if this is going to be fine, but hey, you know what? Let's test. I'm like, yep, that's what school's for, is testing. So when students really invest in this mindset of like, I'm just going to go for it, and like, it's that attitude that helps me as an educator become reassured that what I have to do is to nurture that.
Okay, awesome. Like that was so nice. Like if you are a Jeffrey student and he laughed at your work. Yep, really. Okay, so now we come down to our last round, which is going to be some myth we're going to be discussing and some questions with it. It's not as fun as I'm making it sound, but if someone can make it fun, it's you. So our first myth is a lot of students assume that what they do in school is exactly what practice will look like. So our question is, from your experience teaching and practicing, how is school different from practice? And what kind of skills does school emphasizes that might shift once you're working with a client or with a budget?
I think it depends on the school, because like the schools that I taught at and at Daniel's, it's a forward-thinking design liberal arts degree. So what students are learning is how to think critically. We're not teaching them how to put a construction document set together. We're not teaching them to do something in Revit. So we're giving them the tools of how to be a designer, with the idea that they will either on their own or through employment find the skills that they need for employment. Because I think it's almost premature to just tell students these are the only skill sets you need, because how do you start moving from one field to another? So it's like, you only need to know the software, but what if a student just like, you know what, I actually want to go into urban planning. I'm like, okay, so what are the things that are transferable? Maybe not necessarily the software, but the way that you think about design is the thing that's transferable.
100%. Okay.
Awesome. Okay, round two. So some students might feel pressure or uncertainty towards finding their own design voice or coming up with their own style, especially when you see all these professors in upper years with incredible works that look so stylized. So how do you find your own design voice?
Make mistakes and just do is open your mind to get it influenced by as many things as possible. Then you see that design is adjacent to so many other fields. So I think as soon as you step and look at design broadly and you get out of this silo, you're like, okay, what I do has repercussions in other things. Like what we do in design has effect in healthcare, has effect in policy, right? So I think as soon as we get out of the big A architecture school, I think it allows us different ways of thinking. So it's like, it's no longer about, is this building really nice? It's like, okay, what we do and what I do, how can it contribute to something else? So again, it's this transference of the fields that are adjacent to us. And I think the way things look, aesthetics are always, it's something that you'll always, you could argue, right? But like a good idea, a sensible logic, a passion, you can't disagree with that, right? It just becomes a talking point. But aesthetics, we can argue. So it's like, I prefer that we just move away from aesthetics. For me personally, this is just me talking. It's like, what's the idea? What are you passionate about? And I always tell students, I think that one of the most important things is to fail, but fail forward. So make a lot of mistakes, but just make sure that every mistake you make is moving you towards something else.
Yeah. I think for me, it would be like find the purpose as well. And then kind of like working from there, as you said, apart from just aesthetics. The last myth. It is not on the script, but it is here. So, some say that architects have a design code, dress code, which is wearing all black. And as a follower of that, what is up with it? What is the reason behind it?
I actually have a book called Why Architects Wear Black. I think we all have. And actually, I got a really generous gift from a student, and the tote bag says, basically, I wear black. Yeah. To me, it's a cop-out, but it's an attitude. It's counterintuitive, but I like to pretend that I'm really generic, and so that I just kind of like fade away into the background by just like dressing like a ninja that nobody would notice me. But in fact, it actually is something that just
stands out.
But for me, it breaks down what I wear into fundamentals of form, which is proportion, fit and texture and cut, right? So it's not about pattern, it's not about color. It's the things that as a designer I'm really interested in. It's like, what is the proportion, what is the silhouette, what is the materiality,
And how does each black go together? Because there's different shades of black, by the way.
I have a students think it's a joke, but it's true. I have a fall winter black section of my wardrobe, and I have my spring summer black in my wardrobe. I am right now in the transition black that just gets me ready from one to another.
100%. Okay, so that is, by that note, we would end the podcast. Thank you so much, Jeffrey. That was amazing. We had a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you for the privilege.
That's all for this episode with Jeffrey. We were your hosts, Ambreen and Matt. We would like to thank our production team who helped us bring this podcast to life. Thank you, Nathania, Kushi, Janice, Kyla, and Alejandro.
You can find the Future Living Lab podcast on YouTube, Instagram, and Spotify.
And if you want to join more conversations like this and attend some events by FLL, do join us on November 10th in the main hall for a panel event to get the chance to network and listen to industry professionals. Thank you.